Good afternoon, and thank you very much to three excellent speakers, Neil Peachey from TfL, Martin Tugwell from England Economic Heartland, and David Savage, who unfortunately is unable to join us, but we've been admirably, there's a stand-in who we can't complain about because he will be fascinating, and that is Stephen Joseph. So welcome to the three of you. We've got a bit of time now to have a bit of dialogue about what you've talked about. Data is at the heart of everything. It not only kind of enables us to plan, as Martin discussed in his opening, but it unlocks operations and operational efficiency. And also it helps us with management of our assets and the environment in which we work and live. So it is multidimensional. I want to make sure we keep focused on data. So I'll keep bringing it back. We've had a number of questions which deviate a tiny bit, we'll ask them, but be warned that the three speakers have been pressed by me into bringing it back onto data in all its kind of dimensions. So starting off, as I say, thank you very much for your presentations. But Martin, you went first, and one of the things that fascinated me was you talked about data being grounded in the past and our way of working being grounded in the past, and that we didn't necessarily look to the future. However, you then went on to say, but you are looking to the future with the data that you're collecting. And I'd like to ask you, where do you think that change in the way travel is being managed and the way the shifts in commerce and people are occurring, where do you think the lowest hanging fruit is in terms of how that's going to be applied?
Well, it's a great question, Daniel. I think the key thing here, just kind of touching on that first point about not being grounded in the past. One of the reasons why when we produced our transport strategy, started looking at new data sets, or actually data sets that the transport profession hasn't looked at before, like the Experian data set, is because it comes back to rule 101 of transport planning. Travel's a derived demand. So if we understand better why people are traveling, we get a much richer picture, and there are techniques like the databases Experian have which give us that insight. But then we have to work with the business community. We need to work with service providers to understand how they're changing their way of working, and almost to try and anticipate how trends in users' requirements are going to shape the future. It's a slightly different way of looking at it, but where we have to kind of really base our work is a vision of the future. Where are we trying to get to? So we set the challenges based on an understanding of where we start from, but we then use different data sets, different approaches to understand how we get from where we are to where we need to be. That's great.
And that vision is fundamental. I think one of the things that, Neil, you talked about SITS, which I've been following for a while. It's a brilliant initiative. In principle, I see it as being a way of drawing on all the various emerging data sources, combining them with each other, synthesizing, bringing in the old data sources as well. Induction loops are not going to go away straight away. But how do you see that maintaining its agility, responding to the innovations that are going to come out, and thereby doing what Martin's just been touching on, which is making sure we're steering the future, not reacting to it?
Well, specifically with the SITS program, but it is throughout everything we're doing at TfL is we are planning in for the future. So on the SITS program, it's Internet of Things, and we're saying, not only what is the weather today, but what was the weather like a week ago or a month ago for similar circumstances, what's happening in London. But the SITS program, as part of its ongoing budget, is saying, well, we will be bringing new data sets on and new data sources and new ways of thinking throughout the next decade. And both the technical solution and the data management and business organization have been set up to manage a constant iteration and evolution of new data coming in that can be used.
This is a topic that I could interrogate you on for many hours.
And also, we're not averse to buying that data in where we know that it's really, really important. We don't expect to get everything for free, or it would be nice.
Well, there's a very specific, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because in terms of data and openness and how it flows, the Cycle High scheme was an exemplar of how open data can work in the interest of the organisation that generates the data, so TfL. but also benefits the end users and a whole raft of little bits of business or businesses that can play with the data and create apps, for example. Is SITS going to be as open as that?
Some of the information and learning and stuff that's going to be useful for people using the network, we'll continue to expose that data through our universal API and open data. We wouldn't be publishing the AI algorithms, because that would probably be not even possible. But the extra data that is coming in through SITS, some of that will find its way into the universal API, because informed customers make better use of our services. But throughout TfL, the presumption is we're going to share the data, but we look at the data and understand, well, is this sensible to share? There might be some cybersecurity or national infrastructure reasons, issues why we can't share some data. But as I said, the presumption is we're going to share it, but we take a conscious decision on everything.
Yeah, and there are questions about commerciality and security and amongst other things there, I suspect. We'll come back to those maybe. But before we go and look at some of the questions that from our viewers, Stephen, you take a more broad view of transport. Where does data fit into your worldview?
Well, I think it's fundamental, actually, and Martin said some of this in relation to the way in which transport planning has been traditionally done, where you go out and see what people are doing and then you extrapolate that forward and so on. And I think it's clear that the kind of stuff that England's Economic Heartland have been doing, of finding out, of interrogating other data sets and then looking at what the Heartlands population are, the types of people there and what they're doing, tells you a lot. I've been struck, since I've been chairing some of these sessions, just how much data sort of permeated this entire event. Actually, the other stream on universal and inclusive transport, it was being talked about a lot, and some of this is really, really basic. I mean, Martin may remember the Total Transport project in Northamptonshire, in which people went to, just looked at what travel was being done for the for different journey attractors. And I remember one of the people involved, John Sykes, ex-Hertfordshire, saying that he realised that all the bus services were going in entirely the wrong place. And Ali Clabban, actually, one of the from Liftshare and Mobility Ways, on one of the chats, has made this point too, that it's what they've done at Great Yarmouth and Lowestoft. The buses nearly provide a good service for a lot of people working there, but don't quite, and that just adjusting them even a little bit will tell you that. I remember John saying about Northampton that it would be worth putting on commercially a bus service from certain postcodes to the hospital and giving nurses a 25% discount if you make money out of it. And that's what data tells you. I think, Neil, it's not now the case that there are still bus routes in London that have pauses to allow the horse to take on water, but there's certainly places around the place where buses are still being run on historic lines, and where applying data will give you a lot better reaction. And the point made by Sonia from Women in Transport was about data affecting all travellers. There's the famous stuff by in the Invisible Women book about road safety and seatbelts being designed for men, not women, and all of that. She did, however, praise TfL for the data they collect and use, because it allows a much broader range of discussion about this. And Martin from Worldline talking about ticketing and ticketing data allowing you to plan transport properly. And
so there's an interesting one there, though, Stephen, about the regulatory angle. So you talk about buses. The data is there to help us manage our bus services better. But of course, there are other constraints around where the routes are, the timing of the routes, the timetables. Martin, have you had have you got any insights there?
So I was going to say, I wanted to build on what Stephen was saying, because it comes back to my central point. We as a profession have to think much more fleet of foot and adaptable. We've seen travel patterns change almost overnight because of an externality. And I've written policies about the opportunity for digital connectivity to reduce the need to travel. And for 15 years, I've been writing that. It takes a pandemic, and suddenly businesses realize from an economic perspective, they can continue. Now, the challenge for us is, as a profession, there is a richness in data sources beyond the traditional transport, which actually allows us to be much more fleet of foot. If we were an Amazon or a Facebook or whatever, Google of this world, we would be interrogating that data much more regularly and being much faster at how we modify and adjust our offer to suit the user, rather than saying, well, it's going to take 5 years to do this. It's got to be faster.
So in the Connected and Automated Mobility Roadmap to 2030, which Zenic put together, it says that one of the critical threads is cyber resilience, cyber security. So Neil, with the proliferation of data sources, IoT-enabled things, and data, what's your perspective on cyber resilience?
I mean, it's incredibly important. I mean, we, as I said before, we look at each individual data source or store or that we're publishing, but also our systems and our assets, because obviously assets these days are computers as well, and so it is a holistic view of understanding what the data is, but b what the risk of that data getting out, and see the risk of if that particular either the data stream or the system or the intelligent asset were to be hacked or taken over. Some of it, well, it's actually not that much of an issue because we already publish that data anyway. But as part of that cybersecurity, you just have to assume that every point in your network could at some point be compromised. Therefore, you've got to have a non-fragile network that takes account of the fact, well, if say with the e-scooters, where we're pushing the policy data out to say, right, if there's a concert in Hyde Park on Sunday, then scooters aren't allowed in the main bit, and they're going to only do 5 miles an hour around the outside. If one element of that network were to be hacked or some issue with it, well, the rest of the system still needs to work. Same with the traffic lights, that they're all connected with the SITS system, but they're all work locally as well. So if there were an issue, if there were a cyber incident, then they would continue to work on their own systems. But then we're also looking at what the resilience and how we need to harden the individual assets to make sure that doesn't happen. But it's I said in the thing, we're moving to things that are componentized, and that componentization includes the cybersecurity.
Great, thank you. We've got 1 minute 38 left, and we're going to finish on time. Stephen, comments on, do you want to expand a bit on your better transport decisions, and maybe kind of give us a bit of your vision of where those decisions will make the biggest impact?
Well, I think given time, I'll use a phrase that's become increasingly common in the transport planning world: vision and validate, rather than predict and provide. That you work out where you want to get to and how to get there, rather than just do past trends continue. Because one thing the pandemic's shown us, as Martin said, that's not right. So vision and validate. Mike Axon from Vectos was very persuasive on this in the mode shift in the place-based workshop yesterday.
Brilliant. Vision and validate, not predict and provide. Neil, have you got a pithy statement that can compare with that one?
Yeah, so I think it's about commonality and shared data, specifically on that planning. So that previously in TfL, the transport planning would be done on spreadsheets, people manually combining sources, whereas the integrating that with digital collection, saying the data that we give to the customers about where transport is busy or whatever, it's the same data that we use for planning that transport, and whether you've got real-time or planning information for the customer data, it's all the same. We're using
that. Makes sense. Do once, use many times. Yeah. Martin, a pithy statement to close with.
Shaping tomorrow today. That's what we're doing. That's what we need to be focused on.
And in your role as president of CIHT, that was spot on. I support it wholeheartedly. Neil, Martin, Stephen, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure talking to you all and listening to you earlier on as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.